European leaders have never spoken like this about defending Europe, spending more defense. So this is a new phenomenon. My only question is, how much time do we have, and how much time is Ukraine buying us?
Minister Landsbergis, despite Western support, the fighting in Ukraine is ongoing for 2.5 years. What has to change in the mindset or in the strategy on the side of Western countries to help Ukraine achieve victory?
First of all, we have to get rid of the fear. I think that the fear was the main constricting element for us to support Ukraine to the victory. And the fear has several elements. I think that the biggest element is the fear of Russia's military ability that would be tested if Russia considers certain elements of our support as an escalation. And the second fear is what happens if Russia is defeated. And those two fears combined, they created such a dilemma for the Western allies that was unable to assist us, Ukraine to the fullest. And of course, I mean, it's we usually tend to say that it's unprecedented what we did, and in many cases it is. European Union had issued number of defensive support packages, which has never happened in the past, sanctions and so on and so forth. But usually it's best to start with the strategy and the goal, rather than just take it step by step. And without the strategy, without the goal, then it's difficult to say whether whether we helped enough.
How would you define Ukraine's victory?
Well, Ukraine safe and secure within its own borders, internationally recognized borders, part of EU and NATO.
Do you believe that this definition is changing among some allies? Maybe some are growing more open to certain compromises, to some kind of territorial concessions on Ukraine's part?
Well, I think that we should have learned about territorial concessions in 1938. Where did it lead us, and how much did it cost? Because it did not change their dictator. It weakened us in his perspective, in his eyes. The only strategy for negotiating has to come from Kyiv, and we have to do everything in our ability to make Kyiv as strong as possible. I mean, so that and Russia at this point is as weak. So sanctions, everything, because almost every conflict has a diplomatic settlement at the end, right? But if you have in mind concessions that allow Russia to keep land and even continue the pressure on Ukraine, and it's not a negotiations, and it's a surrender.
What do you think are the main implications of Ukraine's Kursk incursion?
I call it a strategic dilemma. And therefore, even outside the usual confirmation that it is within international law, it is a Ukrainian right within international law to do this. But from the military perspective, it is also a smart strategy. Because the strategy that we applied so far, and the Western allies, was of strategic clarity. We declared everything. We told Putin everything. For him, he doesn't even need spies. He can just open newspaper and read where we are. Most of so much transparency, because that's probably the way that we decided to manage escalation, right? If he knows, then there's less room for mistake. But you cannot wage war in this sort of transparency.
There has been some criticism that Europe has been caught off guard by the war in Ukraine in terms of its own military preparedness, in terms of defense production, or simply in terms of how fast it can supply defense aid to Ukraine. Do you believe that this is improving? Do you see some change?
Everybody who understands geopolitics, who knows Russia, knew that this will be happening. We didn't know when, so the shock was when it happened. But there wasn't a single surprised person in the Baltics. We were shocked of the veracity of it, but surprised, no. I wouldn't even say 2014, because after 2008, when he crossed the border in Georgia, he showed that he can do it, and he's ready to do it, and there's no price for it. So that's the thing. So kind of, we were caught off guard because we chose to be caught off guard. That was a choice. Now I see a change. I mean, European leaders have never spoken like this about defending Europe, spending more defense, having military industry being, reestablished and strengthened. So this is a new phenomenon. My only question is, how much time do we have, and how much time is Ukraine buying us? Because this is what is happening, and I hope that it's enough. You see quite a lot of change in the Baltics. Us trying to convince our people to spend more on defense, to build up factories, to cooperate more with Ukraine, to learn everything that we can, because we really tend to feel then if Ukraine would be unable to stop Russians, then Russians would be unable to stop. And then who knows what would happen next.
Do you believe that open confrontation between Russia and NATO is possible? And if yes, is NATO ready for that?
It is possible. Having to remind that NATO is a defensive alliance, and it would be Russia's choice to try that. When we add numbers of troops and missiles and rockets and tanks and just money, Russia is nowhere near to the power that it was during the Soviet Union, that it could match with its Warsaw Pact countries, could match NATO. So in real military scenarios, it's uncomparable. NATO could overwhelm Russia. But the Russians are not counting for that. They're counting for the way that they explain it to themselves, a democratic weakness, inability to make decisions, differences in opinions. And this is what we're seeing. So many decisions in EU have been blocked by a single country.
And my final question, a little bit closer to your home. Lithuania neighbors Belarus. How do you perceive the recent troop movement, the rising tensions on the Belarusian and Ukrainian border?
Lukashenko always acted within a very limited area of independence or sovereignty. Putin draws with chalk, how much, where he can move, what he needs to do. And I think that there's a clear pressure on him to move the troops to the Ukrainian border. And this is what he's doing. I don't think that he's really willing to participate. I mean, Ukrainian army is, with everything that Ukrainian people have faced, it's the strongest army that you have and the biggest one. I don't think that Belarus would be ready to try, what it means to take on seasoned Ukrainian soldiers that have been waging war for almost 3 years, what it would take. So I don't think that and then face the sanctions and everything, complete isolation that would come after it from the West. Now he enjoys a tiny, light sunlight that is coming through his window. That's completely would be blocked. So I don't think that he's ready to try this. But his troops being there just reminds us that that it is an extension of Putin's arm.